Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
And today we're going to talk about the spectacular, the amazing, other terms, Spider-Man.
The ultimate?
The ultimate? There's so many.
The superior?
Isn't it sensational? Wasn't that one of them?
Sensational is one of them, yeah.
Spider-Man games. Gosh, I love Spider-Man.
I love Spider-Man too.
Who doesn't love Spider-Man?
Is... Right? I think this is a pretty nerdy podcast, right? Like, obviously, it's a podcast about video games. And the history of video games, we get pretty nerdy in here.
I thought this was one of, like, us being cool guys. You know, real cool guys.
Hate to break it to you, Mike.
Oh, no, really?
I don't think we are what is traditionally considered cool. I don't know. Actually, video games are cool now. Maybe, 20 years ago when we were kids and into games, they weren't as cool. But now I guess they're kind of cool.
Is that why ESPN won't answer my emails about getting on their podcast network? Is that why?
Yeah, that's part of it.
Oh, come on, ESPN.
Yeah.
Also,
you have to be a cool guy.
Also, I contacted FXX and they weren't into it. They're like, we don't even do podcasts. We're a TV channel.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I'm bad at business. But Spider-Man.
That's right. You and I, Mike, we're not just video game nerds, right? We dabble in other areas, and some of those areas cross over with video games, and I think that it makes sense for us to talk about those areas. So we're going to do that today. One of my favorite superheroes is a little-known hero, small indie hero named Spider-Man.
Very little, cult classic.
Cult classic. He is one of my favorites. I watched the 90s Saturday morning cartoon show. I love the Tobey Maguire movies, at least the first two. I even like the first Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movie, too. The second one was okay,
you know what?
I guess, but
I did, too. I enjoyed the first Andrew Garfield one. Everyone I went with, I saw it with like 7 other people. They all hated it. And I was like, I thought it was enjoyable. And they were like, boo. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be quiet now because peer pressure is real.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're only cool for the things you don't like, Mike. You're not cool for the things you do like.
That's true.
Yeah. So I enjoyed that movie. I do think, so some people had the issue, and I kind of agree with this issue of just this, like, I find it hard to believe that Andrew Garfield is like a nerd, you know?
Oh, yeah.
You're just like, when it's like, oh, yeah, he's definitely not a cool kid or attractive or anything. You're just like, I don't know, this is Andrew Garfield. Come on, guys.
Yeah, also, even in the comic books, like, I don't think Peter Parker looked very nerdy. You know what I mean?
No. There's suspension of disbelief that was tough there. I think Andrew Garfield was a great Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire was the better Peter Parker. Anyway,
what do you think with the new guy that I don't remember his name?
Tom Holland?
Yeah.
I like him for both of the things. He also has a little bit of the, like, maybe you're too attractive to be a nerd. I don't know. Maybe not. It's just weird. But I enjoy the Tom Holland movies too. Anyway, Peter Parker always stood out to me because he's just a kid. He's just trying to do the right thing, And I think that speaks to a lot of kids. He gets bit by a radioactive spider. He gets spider powers. Classic. And all he's got to go on for his superhero is the words of wisdom he got from his Uncle Ben, which is, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And I've tried to take lessons from those words myself, and I'm sure you have as well, Mike.
Yeah, when I got bit by a radioactive spider and I got powers, I was like, I got to be responsible.
That's right. You have to be responsible because those powers, there must also come responsibility with those powers. So I'm mostly talking about Peter Parker because when we start talking about video games, they're all Peter Parker, Spider-Man. Like, with a few like weird exceptions later on that you get some like Scarlet Spider stuff in there, or like some weird Spider-Verse stuff where there's different Spider-Men. But I also love Miles Morales, and I hope that he gets a video game treatment soon at some point.
I would hope so too. Man, I just think Into the Spider-Verse deserves a video game.
I agree. That would be a fantastic game, and that's one of my favorite movies. Yeah.
Including Nick Cage Spider-Man. That was my favorite. I didn't realize it was Nicolas Cage until about halfway through the movie. I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah, actually, so the Into the Spider-Verse movie is kind of based on this like Spider-Verse storyline that happens in the comics, like loosely, like sort of similar ideas. But that comic is sort of loosely based on a video game, Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, which I think was the first thing to introduce like the Madam Web spider person that like oversees all the spider universes anyway. So anyway, there is a lineage from a Spider-Man game into the Spider-Verse. So I just want to draw that connection. But we were not going to talk about that game today. We may get to that on another
Sorry, everybody.
episode.
I'm skipping ahead. I got so excited about Spider-Man.
That's okay. And we're talking about movies and comic books. But let's talk about the video games because we're on this video game podcast, right? So Spider-Man was introduced to the world in Amazing Fantasy number 15, which, again, we're talking about comics again, is a comic book written by absolute legend Stan Lee. So this is important because the book came out in August of 1962, which is before video games were popular by way over a decade. You could even say a decade and a half before video games really started to take off. So when we dig into the history of Spider-Man games, we also kind of dig into the history of games in general, because Spider-Man was a thing for 20 years before we ever get a video game of him.
That's nuts to think about, too. That's a whole different perspective on any of the games we've really discussed so far.
Yeah. So I think superheroes make interesting game subjects because of how action-oriented many of them tend to be. They're beating up bad guys, using their superpowers. Those are all the things we love to do in video games, right? And it makes sense to have video games about superheroes. So I want to reiterate, we're not going to cover all the Spider-Man games today. There are so many of them, and a lot of them just really probably aren't worth covering. We'll get to probably about the Sam Raimi movies, and then we'll probably have to call it on time. But let's get into it.
I'm excited.
The game that started it all was a game called Spider-Man. It was released by the Parker Brothers in 1982 on the Atari 2600, and not only was it the first Spider-Man video game, but it was the first Marvel video game altogether.
Fact of the episode. Boom.
Yeah. Very first Marvel game. It's pretty simple. I mean, it's a Atari 2600, so you can't expect too much out of it. The goal of the game is to be Spider-Man and climb to the top of a building using your webs. So you shoot out a little web and you kind of zip up the web as you shoot it up. On the way, Spidey encounters bad guys. You can swing into the bad guys to get rid of them. But if his webs hit the bad guys, the web gets cut and Spidey falls until the player fires another web for him to catch onto the building, right? So that's all well and good, but the catch is Spidey has a limited amount of web fluid, so you don't want to fall too much. You want to get past all the bad guys and get past the bombs. Once you get past the bad guys, there's bombs that come up and you can defuse the bombs. And I don't know what happens if you don't defuse the bombs. You don't lose. Maybe you lose points. You just don't get points. You take the bombs out the same way the bad guys go out. And then once you start getting to the top of the building, it's guarded by the Green Goblin, classic Spider-Man villain.
Classic
Norman Osborn just flying around on top of these buildings.
Here comes Willem Dafoe coming to murder.
Yeah. 30 years before that, or 20 years before that movie, before he would ever play the Green Goblin.
But they just knew. They just knew this guy's going to be Willem Dafoe.
They knew. So as Spidey, you got to dodge the green meanie to get to the top of the building. And once you get to the top, you win. You hear this weird theme song, which is not the same as the animated TV show's theme song, which did exist before this game did, the 60s show that's where the Spider-Man, you know
that also where the classic memes come from.
That's right. Yeah, that's the original animated series where that comes from. The song that plays when you get to the top of the building is not that song, so I don't know what the deal is with that. But once you get to the top, the game starts over, but it's harder. So there's more bad guys, you get less web fluid, multiple green goblins. It just continues escalating until Spider-Man loses all his lives, and then it's over. So the reason to keep coming back to this game is that scoring system. So you can compete with your friends. You take out bad guys, you get points. Take out bombs, you get points. Finish a level, you get points. So you want to just get a higher score than your friends, I guess.
Get them points.
Yeah, overall, it seems like a pretty solid Atari game. It has some realistic web swinging physics. As realistic as you could expect for a 2600. I was kind of happily surprised by how cool it looks when he swings around. And that's actually something that Spider-Man games become known for. And for many people who play Spider-Man games, especially after Spider-Man 2, the movie game, it's a pretty solid indicator of the quality of that game is how well the web swinging physics are.
If you're going to make a Spider-Man game here, you heard it first, folks. Good web swinging physics.
That's what it's all about. And it all started with the Atari 2600 Spider-Man game.
That's right.
You ready for the next game, Mike?
I've never been more ready. This is exciting because I don't know about any of these games. I love this.
There are so many games, I can't possibly cover them all, and I'm not even going to try. But there is a text adventure game that came out It came out a couple years after this one for 8-bit PCs called Quest Probe Spider-Man. Quest Probe is a very weird name. I feel like
I don't really like that name at all.
That's what it's called. It's like a text adventure game, so you type in what you want to do, and then it has graphics that go along with it that sort of change as you go through. It was part of a series of Quest Pro games featuring the Hulk and also Fantastic Four, or at least Human Torch and the Thing. And all of these games were made by a person named Scott Adams, which is not the same Scott Adams that does the Dilbert comic. I got excited for a second when I found that out. I was like, oh, is it the same guy that made the Dilbert comic? It's not. different Scott Adams. But he was pretty famous back in those days for making these text adventures. So not only did he make the Quest Probe series games, but he made a bunch of other games too. I've never played this game. It seems kind of interesting, and it came out on most of the 8-bit computers of the day. So your Apple IIs, your Commodore 64s, your ZX Spectrums, all those.
How do you always remember to say ZX? It's typed ZX. How do you remember, Tyler?
I'm not.
Is it like a British pronunciation for it? Is that why?
It is a British. It is, yeah. And it was very popular in Britain. That's like the only place it was popular. So if you ever watch like YouTube videos, the kind of people who are talking about the Spectrum are people who played it when they were kids in England. So they're all English and they say ZX.
That's interesting. That's a fun little language thing. I love it.
Yeah. They say that in Canada too, actually. US is really the only place that says Z.
You know what? Let's start saying Z. Let's bring Z to the States, huh?
Yeah. So yeah, that's all the systems that came out on.
Would you like to go to the Zadoo? That's the zoo, but Zadoo.
Well, you only when you're saying the letter Z.
Oh, well, I still stand by Zadoo.
Okay.
You can't take Zadoo away from me.
The next game that I want to talk about is a game called Spider-Man and Captain America in Doctor Doom's Revenge.
Ooh, I love Doctor Doom.
Yeah. It's a PC game released in 1989 on all those same systems, Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, Amiga, Atari ST, and then other like random 8-bit, 16-bit computers. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up where the player plays either as Spider-Man or Captain America, and he like throws a shield and Spider-Man shoots his like web-slinging projectile.
Can we go on a quick nerd tangent real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, up until they finally did like Civil War, I think was where Spider-Man appears, he was really missing from Marvel. Like back then I was so distraught. I thought they would never bring Spider-Man because I feel like Spider-Man and Captain America get in hijinks together a lot in the comics.
Yeah.
You know? And so I'm just really glad that happened. And I'm glad they were in this game way beforehand. That makes me happy.
Yeah, there's a lot of team-up stuff that happened in Marvel. Like, that's kind of a staple for Marvel is all these different team-ups. Like, that's one of the things that they do a lot. I mean, DC does it too, and other comic companies do it too.
Big side tangent, but I thought it's very important to let you and our listeners know the 1990s Jim Lee X-Men cartoon show is in its entirety on Disney+.
Oh.
I had no idea.
That one's got a lot of...
I found it recently, and I was like, that's next. That's next on my list of things to watch.
Oh. I watched the Phoenix saga before I went to go see Dark Phoenix in the theaters, and I think the cartoon is better than the movie.
But the cartoon
is the cool thing about that cartoon. Nerd tangent here is a lot of the story arcs were written by people who did comic book story arcs for X-Men. So like the Dark Phoenix saga in the thing is written by Chris Claremont. Like the guy who did the comic book Dark Phoenix
I love it.
arc, which is very cool.
I like it too because it was like a very like, I don't want to say adult, but like structure wise, it was like there's parts to it. There's like, it wasn't just a kid's one and done show, which was made it really cool as a kid to watch it. You got like invested.
Yeah. There's like previously on X-Men and you're like, you had to know what happened beforehand.
Exactly.
To know what was going on right now.
That was my little tidbit for everybody. You go to Disney Plus and it's on there.
That's great. Anyway, this Captain America or Spider-Man and Captain America in Doctor Doom's Revenge, the critic response for it was pretty universal. Game's bad. Just not fun. But it does have good graphics, and that's really it. It loads slowly, plays badly, and just is bad. Computer Gaming World actually included it on its list of worst computer games ever. This was a list that came out in 1996, and they put it as the 27th worst computer game ever.
Okay,
Yikes.
sorry, Captain America and Spider-Man. I feel bad for you. I feel like you got let down.
Pretty bad. So that's
pretty bad.
I feel like that's a recurring thing that happens with superhero video games. There are some really good ones. There are some highs. Don't get me wrong. Some really good superhero video games. A lot of really bad ones too, especially in the early days of gaming.
Yeah, they get real bad.
Yeah, and these are the days of like things like licensed things just sell generally pretty well, and people aren't very well informed on how to find out if a game is good or not. So they like go to the store, they see, hey, Spider-Man game for the computer. My kid loves Spider-Man and he loves playing games on the computer. This is perfect. And the game didn't actually have to be good because that's all it needed to sell. But anyway, that's what happened with that game. On the way to our next game, though, I do think it's interesting to take a little side tangent into a game called Revenge of Shinobi. Revenge of Shinobi has Spider-Man included as a boss fight. So the
You
boss
fight Spider-Man?
yeah, and there's sort of an interesting like story here. The boss fight was called the Metamorpher, and he shapeshifted between Spider-Man and Batman, which sounds like something that shouldn't happen.
Yeah,
and
licensing
that's because
wise.
it shouldn't. They did not have the license to do this. But like what happened was the artist for Revenge of Shinobi like drew up these monsters. And so like back in these days, like the artist would like draw a thing. I think maybe it still works like this in video game development, but like the artist draw up a monster and then give it to like the programmers or like the technical artists that make these things and be like, just make this, but in a video game, however it has to be in the video game. And so he's like, I just kind of lazily drew. I was just not feeling very creative, and I just drew like Spider-Man and Batman. And I figured when I handed them over to the people that actually put it in the game, that they would like, do something a little different, that they would like take some liberties here and like really spruce it up. They didn't. They just put them in straight up, and that's how Spider-Man and Batman made it into Revenge of Shinobi.
That's fantastic, actually. I like that way more.
Yeah. Later versions of the game actually did license Spider-Man, and they stopped using the Metamorpher as the boss fight. So they included Spider-Man for real. And then the Batman fight is different. So instead of changing from Spider-Man into Batman, it's the same fight, but when he's time to morph into Batman, he just leaves and is instead replaced by a character called Winged Devilman. They never got the Batman license, so I thought that was pretty funny.
Winged Devilman, just like Batman.
Yeah, so the fight's the same. He just doesn't shapeshift. He just leaves and comes back as Winged Devilman. So I thought that was pretty funny and worth talking about. Now we're going to jump ahead a little bit to the first Spider-Man game on the NES. This game is called Spider-Man: Return of the Sinister Six, and it was a direct tie-in with the comic book story arc that was sort of being published around the time. It's the same storyline, but in video game form. It's like not really like they're not really telling a story in the video game, but like that's sort of the backdrop for the game is the storyline. So you're better off reading the comics than playing the game. And that's also because the game's not very good. We continue the trend here of not very good Spider-Man games. It's kind of a generic side-scrolling action platformer. Feels a little bit like Castlevania or like kind of like Zelda 2 a little bit without the RPG stuff. So like there's not really any depth there. The graphics are pretty good though, and the music sounds pretty cool. So I don't know, probably worth skipping. But it was the first Spider-Man game on the NES, so it was also the only Spider-Man game released on the NES, and I'm okay with that.
You know what? I'm glad we mentioned it. It's important, even if it's bad. We got to represent the good and the bad on this show.
That's right, and there's a lot of bad in Spider-Man's
So
video game
much
history. Bad. So now we're going to move into like the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis era. The first Super Nintendo Spider-Man game is really more of an X-Men game, so we'll kind of just touch on it briefly. It's called Spider-Man and X-Men in Arcade's Revenge, which is sort of similar. I didn't pick this up until just now. It's similar to the Spider-Man and Captain America in Doctor Doom's Revenge of just the title format. So Spider-Man and X-Men in Arcade's Revenge is a side-scrolling game similar to the NES game, but this time we got some new characters. We got Cyclops, we got Storm, we got Wolverine, and we got Gambit from the X-Men. And so all 5 of those characters have been captured by the villain Arcade, which is a villain I had never heard of before this game. And each one has to escape his Murder World games. He's like a cross...
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I say he's like a cross between the Joker and like the Riddler, kind of, where he like murders people, but he puts them in weird, like sort of almost like Saw-esque games, I think. Does that sound kind of accurate?
Yeah, so I was going to say, I've heard of this villain, but I don't think I've ever read him in a comic book. Now I think about it, like when I was like getting really into Marvel and like college and stuff, and just comics in general, I was just Wikipediaing a lot of stuff to catch up to the stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like, if you're ever worried about missing out on comics, don't worry. Someone's written a very lengthy Wikipedia article about it. I guarantee it. So I would always do that. And I came across Arcade, and but I've never actually read him, and I don't even know what he looks like.
Yeah, he kind of looks like a cross between the Joker and the Riddler a little bit too. He's got like red hair, and he has like playing cards and stuff. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
I'm gonna Google him after this.
But anyway, you play as Spider-Man in the beginning, and then you play as all those X-Men characters, busting them out of the Murder World games. And then you kind of go behind the scenes of these games, and like at the end, Spider-Man fights Arcade in a final boss fight, and the X-Men come in and help.
That sounds really cool.
Great. It sounds really cool, but we are going to continue the trend here.
Oh,
Critics
no.
praised the graphics of the game, but panned the gameplay, resulting in a game that averages to about like 6 out of 10 or so. Just like, it's like, I guess if you like all these characters and you generally like this kind of game, like maybe it's worth playing, but if you're not into any, like if all of those things don't line up for you, like there are better games for you to play. So I don't know. I kind of wonder if the folks that make these games know, like especially in those days, like they just knew they didn't really have to make good games. They could kind of coast on that license as long as the game's like sort of halfway playable. Yeah, I don't know. I probably would have loved all these games as a kid if I played, because I didn't have any Spider-Man games on my Super Nintendo, but I probably would have loved it even if it was bad.
I would have loved them too. I was a big fan, and well, actually, you might talk about it soon. I don't want to bring it up. It's an arcade game.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you go.
Oh, I actually don't cover any arcade games, so we can take a tangent there.
Oh, okay. I just love playing
if
him
you
in
want
Marvel
to.
vs. Capcom.
Oh yeah,
It was so
yeah.
fun.
That's like, yeah, that's like a more of just like an overarching Marvel game that actually don't have included on this list because I don't think of it as a Spider-Man
I wouldn't
game, but
include it
you're
on
right.
this list either. I think you made the right choice because he's just like a character in that. It's more like we could probably do a whole episode on Marvel vs. Capcom because there's a couple.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of versions of that game.
Yeah, there's like the original. There's a couple. Yeah, it's like Soul Calibur almost in that there's like just like a million versions of it and Street Fighter and stuff. Yeah, the next Super Nintendo / Genesis game on this list is Spider-Man and Venom: Maximum Carnage.
Oh,
And this is
I
a
remember
game-
this game.
Yeah, this is a game that came out hot on the heels of the insanely popular Venom storylines that were happening through like the late 80s and early 90s in Spider-Man comics. That was like a golden time to be into Spider-Man comics, I feel like, because it was like edgy, Spider-Man was cool, and like Venom was this bad guy, good guy, sort of like, oh, lines are blurred. And so they made a game to tie in with the Carnage storyline, which had started in 1992 in the comics. So this game came out in 94. It's a true side-scrolling beat-em-up, kind of like Double Dragon or Battletoads. And it's co-op, so you play as Spider-Man and Venom, and they move through all these levels, beating up bad guys and taking down the ultimate baddie, Carnage. And you can play with friends, and it's pretty cool. It's like hard, really difficult, I think.
Those beat 'em up games are normally really hard. I mean,
Yeah.
Battletoads is known as one of the hardest games of all time. But
Oh, Battletoads is
Double
is a bunch of
Dragon's
BS.
nothing to like flip your
Yeah.
nose up at either. Flip your nose up at? Sure, I'm sure that's the thing.
People say that.
But yeah, I think they're both pretty hard. It would be good, I think, because Double Dragon and Battletoads, didn't they come comboed together? They were like bundled together, weren't they? In some iterations?
Yeah, there was a game that was Battletoads and Double Dragon. Like they had their own game that was like a crossover game.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Just add it to the
So-
list of episodes we could do.
Yep, Battletoads and Double Dragon could be their own games, could be their own episodes, I'm sure. So this game, Maximum Carnage, didn't get great reviews either, but it did have this really cool comic book style of storytelling. So it had cutscenes between the levels that were told with comic panels. They were like kind of animated, and some of them were like straight up ripped from the comic, like they were just shot for shot like panel remakes on the Super Nintendo, which I think is pretty neat. And the game came out on a freaking cool red cartridge, which only a few games on the Super Nintendo came out in. I think the only one that comes to mind is Doom, that also had a red cartridge. I can't think of any other games that had red cartridges on the Super Nintendo.
Oh, I think that's it. I mean, I just thought of Doom. That's the only one I knew of.
Yeah. So anyway, Maximum Carnage is also a red cartridge. There's also a version of the Black Sabbath song "The Mob Rules" on the soundtrack, and that's like during a boss battle against Doppelganger and Shriek. So, and it's not in the credits either. Like they don't tell you that that's in it. That's it. So I don't know if there's a license that they got or if they got away with it or what happened there, but it's in there. The song's in there.
Ooh,
So.
being bad, just like Venom.
Yeah, that's right. It's also worth mentioning that this game received a sequel a year later, Spider-Man / Venom Separation Anxiety. Same style game, same big baddie, worse reception. Game just wasn't very good compared to the game before it, and that game wasn't great either, so we don't need to dwell on it too long, but it was like, I guess it must have sold well because they made a sequel to it. So,
But you know what? It's we have to mention it, and that's what's important.
yeah. The last licensed Marvel game that Sega would publish themselves was a game called Spider-Man: Web of Fire for the 32X. So this is like not a Sega Genesis game, kind of. It was for the add-on that came out for the Sega Genesis. That deserves probably its own episode. I think we talked about it at some point on the podcast, but the 32X could be its own episode for sure. There's not a whole lot to say about Web of Fire. It's like a standard side-scrolling action platformer, more like the NES game. But yeah, it's the last Marvel game that Sega published on their own platforms. So later on, actually, they would publish Iron Man in 2008, but the Dreamcast was like way gone by then. So this was the last Sega-published game for a Sega console. It got really bad reviews, and largely people just forgot about it because it came out at the end of the 32X's lifespan, after Sega had already said that they weren't making any more games for it. So no one cared about the 32X to begin with. Game was bad, so it's not notable, just that it was the last Marvel game that Sega published before 2008. So that's it. Yep,
Sorry,
rest in
Sega.
peace. Web of Fire. And after Web of Fire, we hit a bit of a Spidey drought. So Spider-Man was pretty popular in the 90s, but there was a string of bad games there from like 1989 to 1995 that just like left a bad taste in players' mouths, and developer like just didn't really want anything to do with it. So they sort of put it away for a while, and they waited for a new generation of consoles to come out and make their mark. But in 2000, we reached what I think is a very special game for you, Mike.
Oh, it sure is.
It's just called Spider-Man. That's it. Just Spider-Man. No crazy team of gimmicks, no weird enemies to try to sell games, just a simple promise to gamers, Spider-Man. And it's in the font that was used for the 90s TV show, the animated one from like Fox Kids Morning on Saturday morning, you know? So you know it's at least closely related to that. And that was a quality television show, if I do remember correctly.
Very solid TV show.
Yeah, the storyline of this game actually wasn't related to that. It was its own thing, independent of the animated series. But they were definitely for sure cashing in on the success of that show there. So at this point in time, Activision has the license now, and they're not going to screw it up. In my opinion, this was the first video game to make me really feel like Spider-Man. I played a little bit of it on the original PlayStation, and it's cool. It's like a fully 3D action platformer with fighting, web swinging, and most importantly, Spidey quips.
That's
so without voice acting, yeah, the earlier titles, like they didn't have voice acting because this was all cartridge stuff, but on the PlayStation, we could finally get voice acting, and that meant that Spider-Man could be fully voiced by his voice actor from Spider-Man Unlimited, which was the kind of the newer Spider-Man TV show at the time. It also had a bunch of other voice actors from the TV show, and the man himself, Stan Lee, narrates lots of the plot cutscenes. It's great. Mike, tell me about this game. You spent a lot of time with it.
I played it for 64, and I was obsessed.
Oh, it's a different game.
A different game. I was obsessed with the 64 version. I think, yeah, you wrote it here, but it's actually, yeah, it runs on the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater engine, and it feels like it, too, when you're playing.
Really?
I feel like, for me, when I was playing that on 64, I'm like, this just, like, feels like Tony Hawk, because you do some crazy stuff, you know, but Stan Lee's narration is like one of the bigger things that stands out. Also, that does everything in like comic book form cutscenes, which is cool.
Oh yeah,
like the
that's
pages
different
are
from
turned.
the PlayStation version.
Oh, so yeah, the pages are turned in the N64 version like a comic book, and then also
that's awesome.
In the N64 version, and I'm sure in the other versions too, there are so many secret costumes to get. Like different suits. There's like symbiote Spider-Man. There's Captain Marvel Spider-Man, where you're like, whoa, because Spider-Man was like Captain Marvel for a little while. And it's just like so cool. I mean, this game was so fun to me. And I don't think I ever beat it without using the cheat codes, because getting those certain suits would do like different things. Like I think the Captain Marvel one made you invincible. Like you were just, you couldn't be hit. So I beat it on that because it's so hard. Like you fight this Carnage level in a lab, and it's so hard to beat him. Like I couldn't do it as a kid, and there's no way I could do it now. I don't know if I have this cartridge still. It was red also. Red cartridge.
Oh, really?
On 64, yes.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Such a good game. This game was it was super fun. It made you feel like Spider-Man. For the first time, I could say I felt like Spider-Man.
You're making me want to go back to it and check it out. I've just played the demo of it. I had some demo disc for the PlayStation, and so I played that demo a little bit. And I just remember being kind of disappointed. Well, it was fun, but I was also a little disappointed that it wasn't more like the movie, because probably around that time the Tobey Maguire movie had come out.
Yeah.
And so like that's what I wanted. But it was still fun, and it was still cool. I played a little bit of it.
I felt like this one was cool because it kind of gave you like brief time with all the good Spider-Man villains. You know, you got some time with everybody in this game, which made it really fun.
Yeah. And the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater engine thing is really interesting. And Spider-Man's actually a hidden character in Tony Hawk 2.
That's cool.
He's my favorite. He's my favorite Tony Hawk hidden character.
He is. He's also your favorite pro skater, if I recall.
That is true. He is also my favorite pro skater. This game got 2 sequels, a game called Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro on PlayStation. It was a PlayStation exclusive. And then the Game Boy Color version got its own sequels, 2 sequels, in fact. We got Spider-Man 2, The Sinister Six, and Spider-Man Mysterio's Menace on the Game Boy Advance. So those are all similar to the games they are sequels to. But they actually got pretty good reviews. Like, it wasn't anybody's game of the year, but, if you like action platformers, you like Spider-Man, you're going to have a good time with any of these games. Enter Electro didn't do quite as well as the original because they had some really obscure villains and, like, kind of a lower quality story is what a lot of people were saying. But still, if you were a fan of the first game, I think the second is at least worth checking out. So
try it out.
Yeah. What do you think? We got time for one more, Mike, or do you want to call it?
I think we got time for one more, right?
Okay. All right. So now we're moving into what I call the modern era of Spider-Man games. I realize that this era is now nearly 20 years old, so I apologize if that shows my age. I get it. But something happened in 2002. Spider-Man became an international blockbuster phenomenon with the release of the 2002 movie, just called Spider-Man, starring Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst and directed by Sam Raimi. And these movies, even the first one, they were all huge.
So
and I think
huge.
And it changed superhero movies forever, right? Before that, we had all those Batman movies, which were like not quite so serious, especially the later ones like Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. Like they're kind of jokey,
super
goofy.
campy.
Yeah, and those are fun movies, and I don't want to say that they're bad, but like this changed superhero movies forever. And it really laid the groundwork for both the Dark Knight trilogy, which would start in 2005 with Batman Begins, and it laid the groundwork for the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in 2008 with the release of Iron Man. Now, these movies are not part of that universe, but they showed that we can make superhero movies that were really, really popular. So anyway, I love all of those movies. The third one is, I don't know. I should
love
watch
the third
one
one for different reasons.
Yeah.
That's what I will say. It's still entertaining. It is not nearly as good, like quality-wise, as the first and the second one. They just tried to fit way too many bad guys in one movie. If they'd have just focused on one of those. Because I think they throw in Venom, Hobgoblin, right? And then also the Sandman.
Yeah. There's like too much going on there.
So much going on.
That's the bane of a superhero movie. Like there are not very many superhero movies that can cram a lot of bad guys in and still be good. Like I'm trying to think of so the first Batman movie in 1989, it was just Joker, right? That was just the only real bad guy. I guess they kind of had Harvey Dent in there.
And if you notice, Marvel never, they learn from that mistake for their MCU universe. Like they don't throw in like more than one or two bad guys in a movie. And usually one of them is playing like second fiddle to the other. Yep.
That makes total sense. So anyway, over in video game world, we were greeted with the release of a game called Spider-Man for all three major consoles, GameCube, Xbox, PS2, and PC. Tobey Maguire and Willem Dafoe reprised their roles, which means the game had big bucks behind it, right? Get those guys to come back and do their
voice
things.
acting.
Yeah. So this game plays very similar to the other, like the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation games that came out before it. It's like this 3D beat-em-up action platformer. Each level sort of has a beginning and an end. There's not really an open world going on here. There's some indoor levels, some outdoor levels, pretty standard stuff. But 12-year-old me thought it was really polished and really fun. It had more realistic graphics because it was like kind of trying to emulate the look of the movies rather than comic books or TV shows. And it's also has it's famous for its tutorial level, which is narrated by Bruce Campbell, who has a connection with Sam Raimi, the director of the films from the Evil Dead movies that they did together. So it's just fun. I like it.
That's cool.
The plot follows the game sort of loosely, but it brings in a few other villains like Vulture, Rhino, and on the Xbox version, this was exclusive to the Xbox version, you get Kraven the Hunter as a villain too.
That's cool.
He gets his own little mission thing going on there. So this game was decently received, especially for a game that was a direct tie-in with the movie. And I'd say like the early to mid 2000s is like the height of movie tie-in games. And most of them were just awful, just truly terrible movies or games. So I'm glad this one holds up reasonably well. If a game came out and it's like fine and it was a movie tie-in game, you were doing all right, especially in this time period. So I have a little bit of a personal story about this game. So we got the PC version of it. My little brother got it for a birthday or Christmas or something. And it was unable to run on my family's PC. Like we needed a new graphics card before the game would even boot. It popped up this error about, I remember the error like specifically, it was an error that it needed a graphics card with hardware, transform, and lighting. And it wouldn't even boot unless we got one of those. So we finally upgraded the graphics card in that machine. We went from Intel integrated graphics to a low end. It was low end even at the time, a GeForce 2 MX graphics card. We were finally able to get the game running. So like for years after this experience, every time I like got a new graphics card, I checked to make sure it had hardware transform and lighting. They all did because it's just like super basic feature that any graphics card of the day had. Like even like a Raspberry Pi today would probably have it. Like it's super basic, but
So
for
I
a while
shouldn't
I
be
was like
looking
checking
for
and
it?
making sure.
I look at
No, you don't need to look for it now.
because I was going to look for it in every single graphics card I look at. Where's that hardware transform and lighting? It's 2020,
Yeah,
baby.
if it's not on there, I can't play Spider-Man if I don't have this. So yeah, I think that's the time we've got today for Spider-Man games, but I'm not done yet. In fact, the most celebrated Spider-Man game is yet to come. Some say the next game on our list has yet to be matched even by the latest Spider-Man game made by Insomniac for the PS4. So I guess we'll have to find out next time. You have any good Spider-Man game stories?
I mean, I really just played the 64 one a lot. The opening of the N64 one is a bank heist, and it is the quintessential, this is how you get me into Spider-Man immediately. Like, the starting level of that is so good. And then I think you get off the roof after the level, and you meet up with Black Cat, and you just talk.
Nice.
And then it's like, oh, this is just full on in the world. This is great. And then it just goes steadily on from there. It's a thrill ride. The 64 version, I need to look and see if I have that cartridge still. I hope I do. I got rid of some of my N64 cartridges, and I don't know if I either got rid of them or I lost them and they were subsequently donated. Like, I can't find Pokemon Snap, and I can't find Spider-Man. Yeah, and I'm like, I need to find these again. I might have to go to a game store and try to buy them again, because these ones are so good.
You're making me want to play that N64 one, man.
It's great. I mean, I'm sure if you go buy the game, you can find a perfectly legal ROM somewhere online to play. Totally.
You're probably right, yeah.
Fully legal.
Fully legal. Only for cartridges I own myself.
Exactly.
But what you been playing otherwise, Mike? What have you been playing this week?
So this week, I've been playing Borderlands 3 again, trying to go through that. I've been playing some Apex, but more importantly, and I've already beaten the story technically, and I use that term very loosely, is I've been playing a lot of Minecraft Dungeons with friends.
Ooh.
Very fun.
I need to check that out.
It's definitely like just straight up Minecraft Diablo, but they admit to it to the point where there is a secret cow level in Minecraft Dungeons.
Oh, wow.
If you get
That's great.
all these runes in a certain period, like of different levels, like you collect them over the course of the levels, then you can open up a secret cow level. And I'm like, you know what? They did their homework. They knew what they were doing when they made this game. And it makes me super happy that they did that. So I don't have all the runes yet, but I've beaten the game. So it's one of those games you beat it and then you go up to the next difficulty level and just so on and so forth. So
you get better loot as the difficulty goes up.
yeah. And it was for Game Pass, super fun. And like, it's only $20, I think, if you don't have Game Pass. And I think that's a good deal based on how much playtime you'll get out of it, especially it's local co-op and online co-op. So
oh, that's great.
if you're looking for a co-op game with friends, I highly recommend it.
Very cool.
What about you? What you been playing?
Well, this week I've been playing a little bit more Mass Effect. Keep putting in an hour here, an hour there. I'll get to the end of it eventually and move on to the next one. Most of my time this week, though, haven't been playing a whole lot of video games. But you and I did start playing Halo Reach the other day.
Ooh, yeah.
And we put a little bit more time into it yesterday. And so I'm excited to get to the end of that one.
It flies by. It really does.
I know.
2 chapters does not take long to go through.
Yeah, so we need to play Reach, and Halo Combat Evolved and Halo 2 are both on Game Pass now. And probably by the time we get to the end of Halo 2, or it's not Game Pass, Master Chief Collection for PC. And probably by the time we get to the end of 2, 3 will also be out on PC, and that's very exciting.
Yeah, that 3 is the money spot for me as far as multiplayer and story goes. I really enjoy that game.
Yeah.
A lot of people it's 2, but I was a big fan of 3. Cool. Well, we got some emails. You want to do some emails?
Yeah, let's do some emails.
All right. You want to do the first one from Ryan? Yeah. I refuse to call him an old man.
We got one from Ryan here. Hey, my dudes, old man Ryan here again. Was fun to hear about the SimCity breakdown. Had a lot of memories for it on the Super Nintendo. I can still remember the first time going to my neighbor's and seeing his older brother play it and being amazed that you could micromanage a city and then destroy it when you got bored. That's the thing I didn't talk about. The most important feature is destroying a city. Ryan says, my hot take on the Windows 3.1 games versus Mac at that time is, without doing any research to back up my claims, I'm almost pretty certain there were very, very few actual games that ran on 3.1, and most you had to run through MS-DOS. I remember Ski Free worked on 3.1. I think that's probably correct. I think many games just didn't run in Windows. They just restarted in DOS and ran that way. Keep up the good work, fellas, and until next time. P.S. Do an episode on Gauntlet or something. Thanks.
Oh my gosh. I actually was about to say that about Diablo, Minecraft Dungeons and Diablo. I made me think of Gauntlet. I love Gauntlet Dark Legacy, the arcade game. It's so fun. We will do an episode on Gauntlet, Ryan. 100%.
I would love to.
100%. I got another email. You want me to read it?
Yeah.
All right. This is from Mo. Cheers on over 100 episodes. Thank you. I have fully caught up on all the episodes, and I must say it is bittersweet. It's nice to be fully present with the latest Codex shenanigans, and it was also nice having a bunch of episodes to binge whenever I wanted. C'est la vie. Things have been really slow at work, so I took the liberty of designing a cheesy John Glames t-shirt. I put the design on one of those off-print to order sites, teespring.com/John Glames, and I've kept the price at cost in case anyone wants to relish. Oh my gosh, the John Glames glory with me. Sorry, I stopped reading it because I got so excited. I want to click on this link really bad. He has a JPEG for this shirt. It says Glames, John Glames, and it looks really cool. I'm going to buy one for sure. Anyway, speaking of work, well, actually, he has another thing there. It's at teespring.com/John Glames. I've kept the price at cost in case anyone wants to relive the John Glames glory with me. Not trying to make a buck, I promise. He says, we believe you. Mo, you seem like a great person because you made a John Glames t-shirt, and who would do that? That's a bad person. I don't believe it. Anyway, speaking of work, I've been wanting to ask, what do you two do for work again? I remember Mike mentioning stand-up comedy and Ty mentioned something about technology. I'd love to hear a little more about your day jobs. I do stand-up comedy, and I also work in indie video game marketing. Those are the only two jobs. Well, actually, no, one of them I don't have left because of this whole thing. So, but yeah, it's kind of depressing. I'm just kind of floating by on my freelance work right now, but hopefully it comes up soon. And Tyler works for a video game company that we may or may not name.
Yeah, I work in communications for video. It's not a secret. If you look on my Twitter, you can see it is. I just don't want to give the impression that there's any sort of conflict of interest here. I don't know.
There's no connection.
Yeah, any money. I work at a video game company. My opinions are my own. If you look at my Twitter feed, I'm sure you can figure out. If you Google me, you can figure it out. So
that's
don't worry
right.
about it.
He works on the remake of John Glames. No, so I do stand-up comedy and a bunch of other freelance work, and then Tyler's works for a video game company. But he has more here. Mo has more here. Also, I know your topic for the list of podcasts is probably getting super long, but I've got a few of my favorites to add to the Google spreadsheet tome. Okay, here we go. So these are actually really good. I like these. History of PC games, which we've kind of talked about before. I think that'd be a really good one. And this is all Tyler. I mean, I could help, but Tyler's going to know most about it. Mo says, I'm not sure what this would look like. Maybe some highlight games throughout the years, key hardware updates, etc. I love console games too, but I'm a PC gamer at heart and would love to hear some of those great Mike and Tyler tidbits on PC gaming history. Okay, that's good. Blizzard games, Valve games, HAL Laboratory. I love HAL Laboratory. I always forget about HAL Laboratory. And lastly,
me too.
Mariah says, Bethesda is probably my favorite publisher, at least in their golden age, which seems to have ended with a mess surrounding Fallout 76. I love the Fallout episodes. Can't wait until the Elder Scrolls episodes. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for bringing us a great podcast. Spiderbutts Mo. They go by Mo, and I've been saying their full name now this whole time, and now I got to fix it. But I will. I'll fix it.
All right. Yeah, this is a weird one. It's from someone named Jerry Spencer. Says,
oh, man.
Tyler, how can you claim to be a Jaybird champion if you've never played me? This is question mark, exclamation mark, question mark, exclamation mark. So he yelled this at me.
Oh, man.
I'm Jerry Spencer, but most people know me by the name Dr. Mac, Jaybird World Champion. I have played in over 1,300 Jaybird tournaments and have yet to lose a match. That's a record of 6,500 to 0. Can you touch that? I doubt such a small, cowardly Jaybird loser would have anything close to that. That's why I'm calling you out. You think you're the best? It's time to enter the Thunderdome. That's where the Jaybird boys are separated from the Jaybird men. What are you waiting for? Don't tell me you're scared. You can only duck me for so long. Bye for now, coward. Signed, Dr. Mac, the real Jaybird World Champion.
I don't know. You have to challenge him, right?
I mean, I guess came out of the blue. I don't know how to respond.
Also,
to
anytime
this.
I see duck in a email, I think it's a spelling error. It's like a autocorrect. So I'm glad the situation is just duck. I don't know what to think of Jerry Spencer. I mean, I didn't expect us to be called out on the Jaybird prowess, but I'm into it.
Wow. I mean, we were kind of doing the Jaybird thing as a joke, but I mean, I guess if this is,
I think it might be time to start training.
It might be, yeah.
Cue the music. Right, live to win.
So we'll see, I guess, if Jerry wants to, or Dr. Mac, excuse me, I don't want to be disrespectful. Dr. Mac, if you want to give me some more details on when and where, I guess.
I mean, hey, it's happening, it looks like. So, okay.
Yeah.
Here is, this one's from Will. Will from Texas. Hey guys, this is Will from Texas again. I still love the pod. That's good to know. You guys are helping me through quarantine, and I need a mental break from work. I have 4 unsolicited suggestions for topics to be covered on the pod. If you hate them, then hopefully we can still be friends. I'm sure we'll still be friends, Will. Don't even worry about it. History of Metroid. That's a great idea, Will.
I'm honestly surprised we haven't done it already.
Yeah, it's an integral series for childhood. For me, and there's not that many games in the grand scheme, so it'd be an easy one to knock out in a couple episodes. That's true. That would be so good. Mario spin-offs. That's another great one. You guys are already doing this with Mario Kart, but given the sheer volume of milking, and he says, parentheses, sorry, I mean improving, of the franchise that Nintendo has done, it might be cool to go into all of the spin-offs like Mario Sports, Mario Party, Mario Kart, RPGs, Luigi's Mansion, Wario games, Mario and Sonic at the Olympics. And then he puts, do people play this stuff?
They may keep making them, so I guess so.
And even Smash Brothers qualifies me. We're definitely going to do an episode on Smash Brothers. That's 100% in there. Hot take episodes where you guys rank a long-running series like Mario, Zelda, Elder Scrolls, etc., and justify why you argue about it. And, we might get an uptick of hate mail, he says. And lastly, zooming back into the console wars. You guys touch on this in the earlier episodes, but maybe go back, not each gen's console wars, and talk about who won them in retrospect, including sales figures, library then, how the library stands now, how did they do by region. Again, this might invite hate mail, but who didn't grow up arguing about this stuff at recess, which is so true. Keep up the great work, Will from Texas. Will, those are all
That's
great ideas.
That's a great idea for a game, too.
Yeah, those are all great. We're throwing them all on the list right now. We're putting them on the spreadsheet. We're talking about it. We're thinking about it. There's just so much to cover, you know?
Yeah.
I love it, though. I love it. I'm possibly working on doing another horror thing, just so everyone knows, but I'm trying to get access to the games because I want to play the games before I do it. But I don't know what next week's episode will be, but it will be a surprise. That's for sure. And I don't know if it'll be horror themed. It might be. It might not be. Might be saving those for Halloween when it gets spookier, you know? Get scared. Do you want to read the last email for the day?
Yeah, we got one from Josh here. Hey, Tyler and Mike. I am a new listener who absolutely loves your show. I have introduced your show to my wife and kids who love your show too. I live in Everett, Washington, and enjoy hearing all of the Washington State references you make. Have you guys ever considered doing a live show? Our family would attend. Keep up the amazing work, and we will continue to listen to y'all. Josh.
Josh, I think about a live show every day, but right now, with the way everything is, I don't know if it's doable, you know?
It is very tough to do right now.
I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Yeah, no, I would definitely not be opposed to it. Mike currently lives in Seattle area. I'm in the Los Angeles area. So we'd have to collaborate on some travel. But, I mean, I definitely wouldn't want to rule it out. And I have tons of family in Washington, so there's plenty of reasons for me to go to Washington. So
my whole worry would be, Josh, that we'd do a live show and it would just be your family, which wouldn't be a problem, okay? I'd still do it, but I want to make sure we'd get like at least 20 people there before we do one. You know what I mean? That would be my whole thing. But I really love the idea, and it would be fun to do the show live. Although the hard part would be not swearing.
We can edit the podcast.
We can't edit real life yet.
Not yet.
But thank you for the email, Josh, and we will consider it, definitely. And I hope you're doing well. And also, I've been to Everett multiple times. It's quite lovely. Okay. I think
great. I guess that's it then, right?
Yep, that's it. If you want to rate and review, subscribe to us, you can do that on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. You could tweet about us. That helps out. Tell your friends. That'd be great, too. I'm on Twitter at @mecoletta. Tyler's on Twitter at SneakerElf, ELPH. And I think that's it for the day. You want to say bye to everyone, Tyler?
Yeah, goodbye, everyone.